The date is December 8th, 1980. We're in Manhattan, New York City, right outside the Dakota apartment building. And tonight, we're going to be examining the sources surrounding one of the most sudden and just deeply shocking tragedies in modern history, the murder of John Lennon.
It's an event that still carries this incredible weight decades later, I think because of how abrupt and just, how senseless it was. So our goal here is to take a thorough look at the compiled record, all the testimonies, the research, and really lay out the factual narrative.
Right. We want to understand the perpetrator's mindset, the actual circumstances of that night, the chaos that followed immediately after, and of course the huge cultural impact.
And we should say this is obviously a very heavy subject. We're approaching it with a great deal of respect for John Lennon and for everyone affected by this loss.
Absolutely. Our aim is to bring clarity to the facts, and we have a really detailed set of sources here covering everything from the killer's psychological state to the minute-by-minute timeline of Lennon's last day.
It also covers the frantic attempts to save his life and the really unprecedented way the world found out. It's an exploration of how a moment of creativity can just be completely shattered.
Let's start with the origins of this tragedy then, which really began in the mind of one person, Mark David Chapman. He was 25 years old, a former security guard from Honolulu, Hawaii. And the sources tell us he was at one point a Beatles fan.
He was, yeah. And that's what's so disturbing. The question is, how does that admiration sour into this kind of destructive obsession?
And the answer seems to lie with a book.
It does. It's rooted in a very specific psychological fixation on J.D. Salinger's novel, The Catcher in the Rye. For Chapman, the main character, Holden Caulfield, wasn't just a character. He became a kind of moral compass.
A compass pointing him toward this idea of phoniness.
Exactly. Holden Caulfield has this, this rage against hypocrisy, against the phony adult world. And Chapman, he sort of adopted that mission for himself. He saw himself as a phony killer.
But to then connect that to John Lennon, a global symbol of authenticity and peace, it just seems like such a contradiction.
It's a profound irony, and that irony is actually what fueled the whole thing. In Chapman's mind, there were two main reasons why Lennon was the ultimate phony.
The first one goes way back.
It does, back to 1966. Lennon's famous comment that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. Now, Lennon had apologized for that years earlier, but for Chapman, it was proof of an unforgivable arrogance.
And the second point was more current. It was about Lennon's lifestyle in 1980.
Right. This is the real core of the accusation. You have John Lennon, the man who wrote the line, "Imagine no possessions," living this incredibly wealthy, reclusive life in the Dakota.
One of the most exclusive and lavish apartment buildings in New York City.
And for Chapman, that was an act of profound betrayal. He couldn't reconcile the man who wrote these anti-materialist anthems with the man who was, in reality, a multimillionaire.
The sources mention that it wasn't just a vague idea of wealth. Chapman was reading books that detailed it.
Yes, exactly. Books like Anthony Fawcett's John Lennon, One Day at a Time. They laid out the specifics, the valuable art collection, the multiple properties. To Chapman, this meant the counterculture hero had sold out.
So in his mind, killing Lennon was a way to, what? Make a statement.
It was a way to destroy the hypocrisy. In his twisted logic, he believed that by killing Lennon, he would be making this grand statement against the phoniness of the world. It was clearly not a spontaneous act.
No, the preparation was incredibly methodical, chillingly so.
It was. It starts on October 27th, 1980 in Honolulu. That's when he buys the weapon, a Charter Arms undercover .38 special revolver.
A small gun, easy to conceal.
Exactly. It speaks directly to premeditation. And then he does something really strange. He contacts the Federal Aviation Administration.
The FAA, why?
To find out the correct legal way to transport an unloaded firearm on a plane. I mean, the level of detail is just terrifying. He wanted to follow the rules.
And there's another bizarre detail about the ammunition, right?
Yes. He was worried that the airport's luggage handling machines might somehow damage the bullets. So he brought the gun with him, but he planned to buy the ammunition hollow point bullets once he got to New York.
It shows just how focused he was on the mechanics of the plan.
Completely. But he didn't go through with it right away. He made a first trip to New York in late October or early November.
But then he left.
He did. He seems to have lost his nerve. He went back to Hawaii, but the obsession didn't go away. He flew back to New York on December 6th.
He checked into the YMCA first, then moved to a Sheraton hotel closer to the Dakota.
Yes, putting himself in position, ready for the day he had chosen.
So let's turn to that day, December 8th, 1980. When you look at the timeline, it is just filled with these agonizingly ironic moments.
It really is. Chapman got to the Dakota early that morning and just waited. He spent hours there, blending in, talking to other fans, and even the doorman.
And he actually missed Lennon earlier that morning.
He did. Lennon had stepped out briefly, but later on, Chapman had an interaction that is, in hindsight, just bone-chilling.
The encounter with Lennon's son, Sean.
Yes. The family's nanny, Helen Seaman, was walking with 5-year-old Sean. And Chapman walks up to them. He reaches out, shakes Sean's hand, and calls him a beautiful boy.
And he quoted one of Lennon's own songs to him.
He did. He quoted a line from Beautiful Boy, the song Lennon wrote for Sean. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans.
It's so disturbing. It shows how deeply he'd immersed himself in Lennon's life before deciding to destroy it.
It's this strange split vision. He's seeing the loving father, the artist, at the same time he's seeing the phony he's there to kill.
And while Chapman was waiting outside, Lennon was inside, busy with his creative comeback.
Yes, around 3:30 p.m., the photographer Annie Leibovitz arrived for a photo shoot for Rolling Stone magazine.
And this session produced one of the most famous images ever taken of him.
It's right. Leibovitz originally just wanted to photograph John, but he insisted that Yoko Ono be in the picture with him. He said they were one person.
And that led to that incredibly intimate photo of a naked Lennon, curls around a fully clothed Ono.
It's an image that really captures their bond and his state of mind. He seemed happy, secure. Taken just hours before he died, it's become this defining portrait.
After the photo shoot, he gave what would be his last ever interview.
He did. He sat down with a team from the RKO radio network. And what's crucial here is his mood. The sources say he was just ebullient, so excited about being back, about the Double Fantasy album.
He talked a lot about the future, didn't he?
He did. He talked about his 5 years away from music, how important that time was for his family, for his relationship with Sean. He said he felt like he was 40, but could be 20. He was just full of plans.
A man who felt like he'd finally found peace and was ready for the next chapter.
Exactly. And then, around 5 p.m., he and Yoko left for the recording studio.
They were going to the record plant to mix her song, Walking on Thin Ice.
And this is the moment. As they're leaving, Chapman approaches. He's holding his copy of the Double Fantasy album.
And he asked for an autograph.
He does, and Lennon, who was often quite patient with fans, stopped. Chapman later said that Lennon was very kind. He signed the album and even asked, "Is this all you want?"
The kindness he showed to the man who was about to murder him, it's almost unbelievable.
And the whole thing was captured on camera. An amateur photographer named Paul Gorich was there, and he snapped a photo.
The photo of Lennon signing the album for Chapman.
It's an incredible historical document, a record of Lennon's last act of generosity just hours before his death.
So let's move to later that night. Around 10:50 p.m., the Lennons are returning from the studio.
That's right. They'd been mixing that track, Walking on Thin Ice, and the plan was for John to go upstairs, say goodnight to Sean, and then they were going to go out for a bite to eat at the Stage Deli.
And they made a small decision that had huge consequences. They didn't have the limousine pull into the secure courtyard.
No, they got out on the street on 72nd Street. Yoko got out first and walked toward the building's main archway. Chapman was there, waiting in the shadows. He actually nodded to her as she passed.
And then Lennon followed.
He did. He was carrying the cassette tapes from the recording session. And as he walked past Chapman, he seemed to glance at him, a flicker of recognition from earlier.
And seconds later, it happened.
Chapman pulled out the .38 special revolver. From a distance of about 9 or 10 feet, he fired 5 hollow point bullets.
You mentioned he chose those bullets specifically.
He did. He later said he chose them because they were more deadly. They're designed to expand on impact to cause maximum internal damage. 4 of the 5 shots hit Lennon.
In the back and the left shoulder, the damage was immediate.
Instantaneous and catastrophic. The bullets ruptured his lung, and crucially, they severed major arteries around his heart.
The sources have slightly different accounts of exactly how it happened, whether Chapman called out his name first.
They do. Some early witness statements said he called out Mr. Lennon and then dropped into a combat stance. Chapman himself later denied calling out, but he did say in an interview that he took a practiced combat stance.
But regardless of the specifics, the result was the same.
Lethally efficient. Lennon, bleeding heavily, somehow managed to stagger up the 5 steps into the Dakota's lobby,
Crying out, "I'm shot! I'm shot!"
Before he collapsed on the floor, the cassettes he was carrying scattered around him, a really tragic symbol of the creative work that was just cut short.
But the staff at the Dakota, their response was immediate and heroic.
It was. The doorman, Jose Sangenis Perdomo, ran at Chapman, grabbed his arm, and shook the gun loose. He kicked it away across the pavement.
And inside, the concierge, Jay Hastings, was trying to help Lennon.
Right. Hastings saw how bad it was. He ripped open Lennon's shirt, covered the wounds with his own uniform jacket to try to stop the bleeding, and called the police. He also took off Lennon's blood-covered glasses.
A very human, tender gesture in the middle of all that chaos.
It was. And while all this was happening inside, Chapman's behavior outside was just surreal.
He didn't run.
He made no attempt to flee. He just stood there calmly on the sidewalk. He took off his coat and hat as if to show the police he had no other weapons, and he just stood there reading his copy of The Catcher in the Rye.
That detail is so telling.
When the doorman, Perdomo, screamed at him, "Do you know what you just did?" Chapman's reply was unnervingly calm. He just said, "I just shot John Lennon."
And when the first police officers arrived,
They found him just like that, standing under a street lamp, reading his book. One of the officers, Peter Cullen, said that Chapman actually apologized to them for ruining our night.
apologized to them.
Yes. Cullen said he questioned the man's sanity right there, thinking, "You're worried about our night. Do you know what you just did to your life?"
The officers on the scene knew they couldn't wait for an ambulance. Time was everything.
Absolutely. They made a critical decision to get him to the hospital themselves. They put Lennon in the back of one squad car, Ono in another, and just raced to Roosevelt Hospital.
And during that drive, we have a heartbreaking account of Lennon's last moments of consciousness.
We do. One of the officers, James Moran, asked him if he knew who he was, and Lennon apparently managed to nod his head, but he couldn't speak. He could only make these gurgling sounds before he lost consciousness.
He arrived at the hospital just before 11 p.m.
Yes, but according to Dr. Steffing Lin, the head of the ER, he had no pulse and wasn't breathing. Dr. Lin was very clear later on about the severity of the wound.
What was his assessment?
He said that even if Lennon had been shot in the middle of a fully staffed operating room, quote, he still wouldn't have survived his injuries. The damage was just too massive.
Let's talk about the specific medical reasons. The sources go into detail. It wasn't just blood loss in general.
No, it was catastrophic damage to specific vital blood vessels. The hollow point bullets had destroyed the major arteries coming off the top of his heart, the aortic arch, and the left subclavian artery.
And damage there is unsurvivable.
It is. The aorta is the body's main pipeline for blood. Once that's destroyed, the circulatory system fails in minutes. You simply can't replace the blood fast enough. He lost about 80% of his blood volume.
But the medical team still tried everything.
They did. They worked on him for about 20 minutes. They even performed a resuscitative thoracotomy.
Which is what exactly?
Yeah.
It's a last-ditch effort where they surgically open the chest cavity right there in the ER to manually massage the heart and try to restart circulation. But it was just too late. There was nothing they could do.
The sources also point to some confusion or disagreement among the doctors themselves about who did what that night.
Yes, which is a fascinating insight into the pressure of a moment like that. Dr. Lin is generally credited with leading the team. But years later, another surgeon, Dr. Richard Marks, claimed he was the one who did the surgery, and then a third doctor disputed both of them.
It seems like everyone wanted to be the one who tried to save John Lennon.
I think that's exactly it. It speaks to the chaos and the sheer magnitude of the event. They were part of history, and their memories of it became competitive.
Lennon was officially pronounced dead around 11:15 p.m., and there's this one surreal final detail from the hospital.
There is. Several witnesses noted that at the exact moment he was pronounced dead, the Beatles song All My Loving was playing over the hospital's PA system.
Unbelievable.
A truly tragic coincidence.
Immediately after, Yoko Ono had one urgent request.
She did. She pleaded with the hospital and the police not to announce the death to the media just yet. She was terrified that their son, Sean, would find out by hearing it on the news.
A mother trying to protect her child in the worst moment of her life. But that request wasn't honored.
It was bypassed completely by chance. A WABC TV producer named Alan Weiss just happened to be in that same emergency room for a motorcycle accident he had had.
Right place, wrong time.
Or right place, right time for a journalist. He overheard the police, realized who the victim was, and he immediately called his station. He broke the story.
And that news traveled up the chain at ABC incredibly fast, leading to that iconic television moment during Monday Night Football.
That's right. The news reached ABC News president Roone Arledge, who then relayed it to the broadcast booth, Frank Gifford and Howard Cosell.
And Cosell, who had actually interviewed Lennon before, was hesitant to announce it.
He was. He didn't feel it was appropriate during a football game, but Frank Gifford insisted. He told him, "You've got to. It's a tragic moment, and this is going to shake up the whole world."
So Cosell did it.
He did. He delivered that famous, solemn announcement. John Lennon, outside of his apartment building on the west side of New York City, shot twice in the back, rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, dead on arrival.
And his follow-up line captured the mood perfectly.
Hard to go back to the game after that news flash, and all Frank Gifford could say was a stunned, simple, "Indeed it is." And in that moment, the news was out. The world knew.
The reaction was just immense. It was on a scale usually reserved for, world leaders.
It really was, and Yoko Ono's first public act was one of incredible grace. She immediately rejected the idea of a traditional funeral.
Right, she issued that statement.
She did. There is no funeral for John. Instead, she asked for something global. 10 minutes of silent vigil on December 14th, asking everyone to just pray for him.
The reactions from the other Beatles were, of course, intensely scrutinized. George Harrison's was particularly poignant.
It was. His public statement was about the horror of gun violence, calling it the ultimate robbery in life. But his private comment to a friend might be even more revealing.
What did he say?
He just said, "I just wanted to be in a band. Here we are, 20 years later, and some whack job has shot my mate." You can just feel the exhaustion and the bewilderment.
Ringo Starr's reaction was more practical, more immediate.
Yes. He was in the Bahamas, and he just dropped everything and flew straight to New York to be with Yoko and Sean, to just be there for them.
Then there's Paul McCartney. His initial comment caused a huge controversy.
It did. He was ambushed by reporters leaving a studio, and when they asked for a reaction, he just said, "Drag, isn't it? Okay, cheers, bye-bye."
And people were appalled. It sounded so callous.
It sounded that way, but he spent years explaining it. He said he was just in such a deep state of shock and anger that he literally could not find the words. He said he felt fear, madness, like the world was ending. It was a moment of pure, unprocessed grief under the worst possible circumstances.
The public grief was on a scale that's hard to even imagine now.
It was. Sources from the time compare it to the reaction to the assassinations of JFK or Martin Luther King Jr. and that silent vigil Yoko asked for. It was massive.
Especially in New York Central Park.
Oh, absolutely. The sources estimate that 225,000 people gathered there, right across from the Dakota. Just a sea of people standing in silence, holding candles. It was this incredible, spontaneous outpouring.
But that intensity also had a darker side.
It did, tragically. The sources confirm that at least 3 Beatles fans committed suicide in the days following the murder. It got to the point where Yoko Ono had to make another public statement, begging mourners not to give in to despair.
And then there's a commercial aspect. The fate of his final album, Double Fantasy, changed overnight.
It really did. It had only been out for 3 weeks, and the reviews were mixed. Sales were okay. After the murder, it became a global #1, a cultural artifact.
And it went on to win the Grammy for Album of the Year.
It did, and Ono herself made sure that her art directly confronted the tragedy. Her next album, Season of Glass, had a cover that was just unforgettable.
The picture of his glasses.
His blood-spattered glasses resting next to a glass of water. It was a shocking, defiant statement that this violence would not be hidden or sanitized.
So let's turn to the legal outcome for Mark David Chapman. He was charged with second-degree murder.
That's right. Which surprises some people, given the premeditation. But it was a matter of New York state law at the time. His lawyers wanted him to plead insanity.
But he refused.
He did. He said it was the will of God, and he pleaded guilty. And even at his sentencing, he couldn't let go of his obsession.
He read from the book in court.
He read a passage from The Catcher in the Rye before the judge gave him his sentence, 20 years to life. And as of late 2025, he has been denied parole 14 times.
And Chapman's act, disturbingly, seemed to create a kind of template for others.
A very dangerous one. Just 3 months later, John Hinckley Jr. tried to assassinate President Reagan. And when police searched his things, they found a copy of The Catcher in the Rye.
The connection was explicit.
It was. Hinckley even left a tape saying he mourned Lennon's death and felt he needed to make some kind of statement just like Chapman did.
Now, given Lennon's history as an anti-war activist, it's not surprising that conspiracy theories emerged. We should touch on what the sources say about those, impartially.
Right. It's important to note that Lennon was under surveillance by the FBI and CIA in the 70s, that history provides the context for these theories.
Was the main thrust of him.
One theory, put forward by a journalist named Fenton Bressler, suggests Chapman was some kind of brainwashed assassin, like in The Manchurian Candidate, a pawn controlled by an intelligence agency.
And there were also questions raised about the doorman at the Dakota.
Yes, Jose Sajanés Perdomo. A documentary in 2010 pointed out that he was a Cuban exile with alleged links to anti-Castro groups and the CIA's Bay of Pigs invasion. The theory suggests he might have been there to facilitate things.
But we have to be clear, these are unproven theories.
Absolutely. They remain speculation, but they exist because of Lennon's very real political history.
Moving on to how Lennon is remembered. There's so many physical memorials now.
The most famous, of course, is Strawberry Fields in Central Park, directly across from the Dakota. It was dedicated in 1985 as a peace garden.
With the iconic Imagine mosaic at its center.
Yes, which was a gift from the city of Naples, Italy. It's become a site of constant pilgrimage for fans from all over the world.
And Yoko Ono created another major memorial in Iceland.
She did. The Imagine Peace Tower. It's a tower of light that's projected into the sky. They have. The sources say the clothes he was wearing, still stained with blood, have been part of museum exhibits. Even the concierge's blood-stained shirt was sold at auction. It shows how every detail from that night has been preserved in our collective memory.
But perhaps the most enduring memorial is in the music that his death inspired.
I think so. The response from his peers was immediate and deeply personal. George Harrison reworked a song into All Those Years Ago and had Ringo and Paul play on it. It was a kind of Beatles reunion and tribute.
And so many other huge artists felt compelled to respond.
Oh, yes. Elton John wrote Empty Garden. Queen's Freddie Mercury wrote Life is Real. Even Bob Dylan, years later, wrote the song Roll on John. It shows that the loss was felt across the entire landscape of music. It left a void.
And the fight against gun violence, which took him, became a cause for his friends, even decades later.
That's right. The sources note that in 2018, Paul McCartney marched in the March for Our Lives. And he said he was there because, quote, one of my best friends was killed in gun violence. The ripple effects of that one act in 1980 are still being felt.
As we look back on everything we've examined, the story of that night remains this singular tragedy. A life that had just found its balance, its purpose again, was just violently extinguished.
What really stands out is that conflict between creation and destruction. You have this global icon made vulnerable by a killer's intensely personal, ideological crusade against phoniness. And the shockwave that followed was just planetary.
And when you trace the events from that last kind of act of signing an album to the world's grief, to Yoko Ono's use of art like the Season of Glass cover,
Yeah,
it's a powerful story.
it is. And it makes you think about a fundamental question. How does art respond to destruction? John Lennon's life was ended, but the creative explosion that followed commercially, artistically, it showed that the only real answer to that kind of violence is creation, is memory. The act stopped the man, but in a strange way, it amplified his message forever.
A sobering thought on the price of fame and the legacy of the man who asked us all to imagine.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening.